And a very good evening to you, and welcome to today's edition of Politics 101. I'm David Hines. I would like to welcome you wherever you are in Guyana, in the Caribbean, in North America, in Europe, wherever you are tuning in to this program. We would like to welcome you, and as usual, ask you to share the program with others so that they can be part of this experience. Tonight's program is going to deal with a topical subject, and that is the subject of the cash grant that is being distributed by the government to school children. And it's a grant of 19,000 Guyana dollars, just shy of 100 US dollars. And it is meant to, as the government says, to show that the government care, because we care. We are giving each school child $19,000. We are talking about Guyanese politics, and of course, once it's Guyanese politics, regardless of what the issue is, it is hardly likely that we are going to find common ground. Just a background to the whole question of cash grants. It was a policy proposal proposed by the Working People's Alliance back in 2018 when Professor Clive Thomas, on behalf of the party, at a meeting in Buxton, launched what was called at that time the Buxton Initiative. And it basically argued that the best way to compensate or to make it possible for the working people, the ordinary people of Guyana, to benefit from the common oil resources was via what Professor Thomas called a cash transfer. That is a transfer from the government to the citizens of Guyana via the households, a cash transfer to the households to ensure that there is direct, um, uh, a direct payment, if you will, to the ordinary people. Of course, there were proposals and are proposals on the table of how to utilize the revenues coming from oil. Most people know that one of the ways in which you transfer resources to people is via investments in the various sectors, investment in education, in healthcare, in infrastructure, example. And some people thought that that would be enough. But Professor Thomas and the WPA, studying what has been happening across the world, drew to the attention of Guyanese that in most oil-rich countries, the cash transfer has been used as one way of getting resources directly to the people, and they introduced it. It caused quite a stir in the media and among the people. It was debated for weeks. The proposal was made to the APNU government at the time by the WPA. The government balked at the policy, arguing that, well, certainly the top leadership of the government argued that the cash grant or cash transfer would not be good for Guyana as it would introduce into the country a sense of dependency. You know, that people will take the money, they wouldn't want to work, they would smoke it out and drink it out and so forth. The PPP, for its part, was ambivalent. The then attorney, well, not then attorney, the former attorney general, Mr. Anil Nandalal, argued also that the cash transfer would dependency among the people, and he was opposed to it. Mr. Jack Dew and other PPP leaders were less strident against it. They thought the cash transfer was a good idea, but they had their own sense of what it should be. They talk about the targeted transfer, cash transfer, etc. The long and short of it is that the society was robbed of an intelligent discussion around this issue of cash grants and how it could benefit the working people of the country. Suffice to say that although it was included in the manifesto of the coalition did not campaign on it, and so the matter fell away until the PPP came to office and they first of all proposed a COVID-19 cash grant in which they distributed $25,000, and they then began to talk about an education cash grant, $19,000. To be fair to the PPP, prior to them losing office, I think in 2014, they would have introduced this grant. It might have been $10,000, I'm not sure, $10,000 that they gave. So in fairness to them, they had done that. When the coalition came to office, it discontinued that grant. I give this introduction to say that the issue we're going to be discussing tonight is a controversial issue. It's an issue that the general population has not been sufficiently educated on. And once the cash transfer or cash grant of $19,000 was introduced by the PPP, it became part of the political back and forth between the two political forces. What we're going to try to do tonight is try to figure out what the $19,000 is all about. Is it a genuine cash transfer aimed at improving the lot of working people? Is it because the government cares? Is it a political gimmick? Is cash transfer a bad thing? Those are questions I will pose to my guests tonight. One of my guests has been at the center of the debate, and that is the General Secretary of the Guyana Teachers Union. And teachers, of course, are part of the education process, and so they are integral to this cash grant. Ms. Coretta McDonald is also a member of parliament for the opposition APNU, but she's been speaking on this matter as a representative of teachers. We understand that teachers are mandated now to distribute the cash transfer, so that brings into question whether that is part of the job description of teachers. And Ms. McDonald has been zeroing in on that issue. We have Mr. Kidaki Amsterdam, who is an executive member of the WPA, which first popularized the whole notion of cash transfer. And as usual on this program, what we are going to try to do is to make sense for you, the audience, of what are the underlying issues. We will try to answer some of the questions that you have been having. And we would also allow our participants to clarify misunderstandings, because we live in a society in which you can say something that means something and somebody turns it into an opposite meaning. And I know Ms. McDonald has been caught up in that. Aubrey Norton also made a statement in which was responded to by Mr. Ralph Ramkaran. Aubrey himself has had to correct what he saw as a misrepresentation of his view. So we're going to be talking about an issue that is quite controversial at the moment in Guyana. Welcome, McDonald, the Honorable, and Kidaki Amsterdam. Welcome to Politics 101.
Thank you, Dr. Hines. Thank you. Good evening, viewers. Good evening, Coretta.
And Coretta, I've been trying to get you on this program for quite a while, and every time I tried, there were very good reasons for you not being able to appear. And so I welcome you on your debut on Politics 101. So I'll start with you.
Thank you. Good night to you and to your viewers.
Good, thanks. Coretta, why you have been in the middle of this back and forth with the PPP, with the Education Minister and others. Tell our audience, what has that been about?
Well, Dr. Hines, you know, and I know, and we all know that the PPP, as long as the shoe doesn't fit, they'll start to scream. As long as you are not in tandem with them, they'll shout, they'll condemn, and they'll do all sorts of things to bring you down. But I want to say Coretta McDonald is Coretta McDonald and will always be Coretta McDonald. Coretta McDonald, let me say clearly, is a brand. And there is nothing that the PPP or any one of their cronies can do to break me or to make people see me as a different person. Before I answer the question, let me say this. In 2018, when the coalition government was in power, the GTU took massive industrial action. And let me back up a little to say, in 2003, we had the largest of industrial actions that would have ever been taken by the Guyana Teachers Union, and that was against the PPP government. In 2018, continuing along that line, we would have had industrial action, but not of that magnitude. But in 2018, we took industrial action against the coalition government. And you know what? The PPP had no problem with that. They had no issues with that. They weren't even concerned whether you were part of the coalition or not. But all they were interested in then was the fact that industrial action was taken against the coalition government. And so Coretta McDonald was placed on the clouds then. But the table is different now, because Coretta McDonald is continuing to stand with her union. As a matter of fact, let me remind the viewers and let me inform those who don't know that Coretta McDonald is a teacher by profession. And so whatever happens with regards to the outcome of our negotiations, that's where I benefit from. Coretta McDonald doesn't receive a salary from the Guyana Teachers Union. Let me make that clear. And so for those PPP trolls who are going out there and spreading all kind of false rumors, just they like drama. And so they go out there to spread false rumors about the officers at GTU living big lives off of the dues of teachers. We are a different union as compared to other unions. Our officers are not full-time and they're not paid by the union. Every single officer that stands to represent teachers, every elected officer, let me say that, within the Guyana Teachers Union, at the central level, they are all being paid by the Ministry of Education. What they receive from the GTU is a stipend. And in the highest of the stipends is just $150 US. So I needed to make that clear. But Coretta McDonald is no stranger to conflicts. And I can deal with that. I'm tough and I can deal with that. But the fact is, teachers, or as a teacher and as a teacher's representative, we have had to struggle for the longest while. First, for 23 years under the PPP. And then, when it seems as if we were getting somewhere, the heat was turned on again on us. When the coalition came into being, we thought then that we were going to see the light of day. We had our bad patches. We had to stand strong like we're standing right now, and we'll stand stronger. We had to stand strong to give the kind of representation that our teachers needed. And Now we will continue to stand strong. And so the whole confusion here now is the influence that Coretta McDonald has. That's the big problem here. And the PPP, they are afraid of Coretta McDonald and the influence that she has. And so every time there's an issue, they try to zero in on Coretta McDonald, APNU, AFC member of parliament, activist, opposition member. That's what they zero in on. It's all well and good for them to make, to just zero in on that. And whereas Coretta McDonald usually states clearly, yes, I know technically you can't divide or separate Coretta McDonald, General Secretary, President of the TUC, Member of Parliament. You cannot separate those from her. But whenever I sit at meetings with the Ministry of Education, the issues being documented, the issues being discussed, the issues that we set out to agree on and to work in partnership with the Ministry of Education are all educational issues. They have nothing to do with APNU, AFC, or the PPP, or any other party. They don't have party issues. We talk about educational issues. And that's the issue, and I think that's a difficulty that Priya Manik Chand is having, and Bharat Jagdeo, and the whole side of them. That's the issue that they're having. They see Coretta McDonald, well, I shouldn't say they know fully well that Coretta McDonald is a threat. And that whenever Coretta McDonald decides to do something, she does it to the best of her ability. And more so, when it comes to benefits of teachers, I don't mince matters. And they know that, they're aware of that. And so to do whatever they think is possible to do to besmirch her character, they would try to do that. But let me remind them, I am a hard nut to crack. And I can stand tall because I've never been out there one day to make any offer or any deal with Bharat Jagdeo or Priya Manik Chand or any one of them, whether under the table, at the side of the table, outside of the door, when it comes to teachers' business. I've never gone out there to make any deals to satisfy Coretta McDonald. I've never been out there to ask Bharat Jagdeo or Priya Manik Chand for anything for Coretta McDonald. Anything that I would have engaged them on would have been for the benefits of teachers across Guyana, whether they are members of the union or not, and that's where Coretta McDonald would benefit. I don't go out there to make side deals with them, and that's the problem that they have. So when you see Priya Manik Chand open her mouth there to say all sorts of foolishness, all of those are just because she knows exactly what Coretta McDonald can do.
Yeah, but thanks, Coretta, for that background. And you're right, there is always the individualism, the zero in on if you zero in on the individual, you divert from the real issues. That is very much part of our political culture, and you're right to point that out. Let me ask you this pointed question. Is the Guyana Teachers Union in favor of cash grants in the education system?
Let me say clearly to you, the Guyana Teachers Union, we have no problem with the cash grants. We have no problem with whatever the government was going to give out there. Our problem is, we have said to them, if you're going to give a grant, you can't term this grant school grant and not expect parents, who many of them have been dismissed from their jobs, to take those monies to buy school uniforms, exercise books, pencils, sharpeners, school boots. They're not going to do it because the most important thing at this time is survival. And parents are going to use those monies to feed their children. We would have thought that a sensible government who is claiming to be, or which is claiming to be caring, that after so many hundreds and thousands of our children have suffered from not being engaged or fully engaged during this pandemic period over the last academic school year, that a sensible government, rather than giving a school grant to parents at this time, would have gone out there to look at a project that is more long-term. And that project, we're thinking that since we are having now online classes where students are being engaged online, we're looking at blended learning. But most of our children and this is from grades 9 to nursery. Grades 9, for those of us who are a little older, is what we called Form 3 then. They have been at home and they've been engaged in online learning. Many of them couldn't get the engagement, they couldn't get the delivery, they could not have been taught because in many instances, there is either one gadget in the home or no gadget whatsoever. And so it's our thought that a sensible government would have gone out there to purchase tablets, and you you present them to parents who've got 6 and 5 and 3 and 2 and how many children, you present that to them. So in the months to come, when we look to reopen school in September, which of course we can't do full blown, and I'm saying full blown here, quote unquote, fully opening school. We can't look at doing that because we don't have the mechanisms in place to do that. Because this talks about having annexes and so on to many of our schools, or to almost all of our schools because of the school's population. And so the GTU is saying, if you wanted to give, like we know, this is a political gimmick. And if you wanted to give a little raise to the parents, give them that little raise and term it something else. Don't term it school grants, because we know what school grants are intended to do. School grants are intended for educational purposes. And you know what we would have seen coming out of this? We have seen, mommy, and these are parents who would have spoken to me. One parent said to me, she said, Miss, I got 3 children. And every day I have one bicycle that was bought for the older one, the eldest of the 3. She said, Miss, every day is a fight, is a cry, who get more riding than who didn't get ride at all, who riding too long. She said, Miss, when I collect that money, it's 2 more bicycles I buy. So I ain't gonna hear fighting, I ain't gonna hear screaming, nobody ain't gonna cry because everybody get their own bicycle. And other parents would have said, well, I'm not working, and so what I'll have to do is the little that I've collected there from that little $19,000, I'm going to stock up on some food. You tell me if a school grant, if that's the purpose of a school grant. And so that's the GTU's position. The other position that we had with this school grant, we said, if you want to give those grants to the parents, then our teachers should not be mandated to go out there to distribute monies, because you, the ministry, in a circular that was sent to all schools across this country, dictated that teachers should not be handling monies, whether it's a fundraising activity you want to do for your school or whatever else, contingency fees and so on. Teachers should not be handling monies. That's the responsibility of the PTAs. So for those schools that are collecting contingency funds, the PTA, either the chairman or the treasurer, must be there to collect those monies, and you deposit in your bank accounts. Fundraising activities, the PTAs must be there to collect monies. But now you're telling teachers that they must sit there and distribute monies. And so the GTU, that was GTU's issue. 1, the manner with which they decided to do that, and 2, mandating our teachers to be there to distribute monies. And we advised our members, reminding them of the circular and saying to them, while we are encouraging you to be a part of the process, we advise that you stay away from collecting cash, stay away from storing cash, stay away from distributing cash. Be there to verify that, yes, these are your parents, whether it's grades 5 or 8 or 9, whichever school it is, whether nursery, primary, or secondary, and you aid in whether you have the list for them to sign on and that kind of thing, aid in spacing the 6 feet apart and that kind of thing, not to be distributing cash. And so I don't see that as being very difficult questions, but Ministry of Education, the Minister of Education, let me say, and her team, not the officials at the Ministry of Education, but her team, and I'm talking here the PV government, they have a problem with Coretta McDonald. They don't have a problem with the GTU per se. They have a problem with Coretta McDonald. Because let me say to the audience, your viewing audience, the advisory that was issued last week to our teachers, that advisory was issued by the President of the Union, but you know who got cussed for it? Coretta McDonald. Today, we had a picketing exercise in front of the Ministry of Education. It forced the to have a press conference. You know what happened there? I think I'm having some issue with my with the system. Okay, good. Yes, today's activity was as a result of our statutory general council meeting, which happens on.
I think we have lost Coretta there. Kidaki Amsterdam, let me bring you in while we reconnect with Coretta. Kidaki, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Yeah. Kidaki, you have heard Coretta on the first point that the GTU would have preferred the money not be given to parents, but that the money be spent on educational tools that would go directly to the students that would benefit them educationally. Do you think that's a reasonable position?
I think it's a reasonable position, yes, that the money be spent on tools that will benefit the children. But one would ask, who best to acquire the tools for the children? Who best to acquire the tools for the children? The parents, in my mind, are the ones who have been taking care of the children all the time. The parents would know the needs of the children. And so I, quite frankly, don't see a problem with the parents acquiring the tools. But my issue is the inadequacy of the grant. Is the grant adequate enough for the acquisition of tools? That is what we need to address. And in my mind, the grant is not adequate enough. The grant is not even adequate. Oh my goodness. The grant is not even adequate enough because we're hearing that this grant might be a one-time grant. This is a 15-week term, and Coretta can correct me wherever I make mistakes. I'm not active in the school system currently, but I do my research. I have teacher friends in the system and so on, and I understand that this is a 15-week term. And if you're saying this grant is a one-time grant, let's just look at this grant from the perspective of a grant for a term. I did a rough calculation. And if you were to simply say that I will use this grant for the term to send my child to school, and you look at the cost of transportation for a child who has to travel, lunch for a child who has to travel, and perhaps snacks for a child who has to travel, you will come to realize that the grant is less than 50% of what I call a minimal calculation of the expenses. And note I said lunch, snacks, and transportation. Because if you have $19,000 and you have a 15-week term, those of you who can do the division will come to realize that that money comes down to about $1,300 weekly. And so here we are talking about we care, and we are giving our children $1,300 weekly. If you are a traveling child, in 1 week, you will spend a minimum of $1,000. That is $200 a day. Note that these are basic minimal calculations. $1,000 a day. I mean, $1,000 a week for transportation. Assuming that you can get a satisfactory meal for $500 daily, you will pay $2,500 per week for meals. And then you will pay perhaps about $1,500 for snacks. Because we know children at school, they eat all the time. You need a mid-afternoon snack, you need a mid-morning snack. That calculation which I gave you there is a total of $2,500 weekly. Juxtapose that with the $1,300 a week grant. We haven't considered that the child needs, well, it's virtual education. Let's stick with virtual education, right? In the instances of those children who are going to school, like the 4th and 5th formers, they still need things like exercise books. They still need other paraphernalia. They need pens. Certainly, they need uniform. They won't be going to school naked, right? They need boots, which is a part of uniform. 4th and 5th formers are usually, quote unquote, burdened with assignments. They have SBAs. And so they have to be doing constant research. It means they have to either be buying data or paying for internet use, internet cafe use, and stuff like that. So the reality is, any which way you examine the cash grant from, it is woefully inadequate. It is woefully inadequate. And so whether or not the government was expected to use it to acquire the tools for the children, or whether or not it is being placed in the hands of the children, the fact is $19,000, just about what? $95 US or $90 US thereabout, is woefully inadequate. If we're talking about virtual education and the children need tools, the fact is, again, teachers can tell you that in many instances, less than 25% of their classes, their students, are participating in virtual classrooms. Why? Coretta pointed it out. In many homes, there is no instrument, and in others, there might be one instrument, right? That one instrument being the parent's instrument. If the parent has to leave the home, it's likely that the instrument leaves with the parent. In instances when some parent may have a gadget or two in the home for the children, the cost of data bandwidth far exceeds $1,300 weekly. And so then it comes back to affordability of bandwidth for the children to participate in the virtual classroom. Good. So as I like to say, the whole thing is a wheel in a wheel. A government that really cares, would have gone to the drawing board, invite all of the stakeholders, analyze the situation together, and come up with a solution that is meaningful. As far as I'm concerned right now, this Because We Care grant is not because the government cares about the children, but because the government cares about their image, which they're trying to patch. That's my position. And let's look, 1 minute, let's look at the time when the haste is being made to pay out this grant. We are approaching the first anniversary of an election fiasco and an installed government which resulted from regime change. So this is the time. It is also the period when constitutionally the country is supposed to be approaching an election, local government elections. And so I believe the haste to pay $19,000 to people is all a part of, as they say, buttering up people. That's my position.
But let me put this to you all. I mean, when I talk to ordinary poor people, they don't have an objection to the grant. They like it. They're waiting to collect the grants. I mean, here you guys are critiquing the cash grant when people are saying, we want it. How do you respond to that, Coretta?
Well, you know, Dr. Hines, before I was interrupted earlier, I was going to talk about why the attack is on Coretta McDonald. But
Mhm.
yes, and I said to you that advisory came from the president, but Coretta McDonald got cussed for it. Today's General Council meeting, coming out of the discussions when the meeting started earlier, our General Council reps there who are representing teachers from across this country. We had 20 representatives who were treated physically, and we had the other 46, 46 including, well, not 46, 26, 36, 46, sorry, which gave us a total of about 60 something people. That those were participating virtually. Now, coming out of our discussions, General Council moved a motion, a member got up and moved the motion that we suspend the rest of the agenda and that we go out there to signal to the Ministry of Education that we're tired of what they're doing to us with regards to all the outstanding financial matters, weekly council allowances, duty-free concessions, and the full works, clothing allowance and the full works. But you know what? And we had on that picket line several of our members who spoke with the media. But you notice, Priya Manik Chand only decided to respond or to attack Coretta McDonald. And again, that's okay. I can live with that. But the fact that persons are collecting this money or they're saying they want the monies, I indicated earlier that many of these people or the masses of these people are poor and ordinary people. And quite a lot of them have been dismissed from their jobs. In some instances, you have both parents have been dismissed, not laid off, dismissed. In some instances, you have one parent that was dismissed. And so when we were accustomed to having two parents working, a husband and a wife working, and we were able to somewhat balance the budget a little because we had to pay courts, we had to do this, we had to do that. Now that there's no longer that one income with a $19,000, yes, people would go for that. People will accept that $19,000 because it's coming to fill a hole that was created by the PPP government. On the other hand, we have quite a lot of single parents. Some of them have lost their jobs too, and they're around the place looking for a job here and a job there, a day job, a 2 days job, a week job, and so on. So this $19,000 comes in handy to help them to meet their needs. And so, yes, people would gravitate to that monies. People would want to collect the monies. But like Kedaki said, and I would have gone into that in terms of doing the calculation, we are seeing here that $19,000 is less than 100 US dollars. And I am not sure how much so that can come out of that $19,000, because if you were tracking what is happening, every single item in the market, their prices have either been doubled or 2.5 times the price. Every single item. And so people are under pressure. They are feeling the squeeze. And so $19,000, yes, they'll accept it. And you know what they'll say? They would say to you, well, okay, I'm hoping that come August month end, the government would decide, the installed regime would decide, we're going to give another 19,000, or maybe at the end of August, they're going to say, well, we'll give another $19,000. Persons are hopeful for that. And this is the kind of dependency that the PPP trolls want to have Guyanese people under. This kind of dependency. They don't want to teach you to fish. They always want to go fish and come and give you so that you can always be there stretching your hands. You can always be there so that they can come with this perceived notion that they are the savior, that they are the Jesus. So they're coming to offer the help that people need. Whereas when we had the coalition government in power, rather than giving cash to parents and in terms of grants for schools, what we had there, we saw buses, many buses along the streets of Guyana, picking up dropping off school children. We saw boats picking up, dropping off school children in many, many riverine areas. We saw bicycles being given to students and the pupils, which aided in their transportation, which helped parents to rest at home safely, knowing that there is a responsible bus driver who is there to pick up and drop off my child at a certain time. It also taught our children timing and that they should be at a particular place for a certain time to be picked up by the bus. And when school is finished, they must assemble at another point. And so it taught them so many little things. We had the issue of breakfast because we recognize that many students go to school and they don't have anything to eat in the mornings. They don't have lunch at lunchtime because parents can't afford it. And so the coalition government had them, the breakfast and the lunch that they prepared for students. This did not happen all across the country, but that needs survey was done. And so in the areas where it was most needed, that was instituted. We saw the books and the bags that were given out, and these were done on a termly basis. Maybe the first term and the last term they were given to students. And so that would have been a better way to help parents to save in on, rather than having to buy a school bag or a school boots. You could have used that money to do something else. Rather than spending money on transportation, you had a bus provided, you had boats, you had bicycles for your children. So you saved those monies and you could have used them to do other things with, rather than going out there to bribe the citizens out there to try to soften their hearts, because the PPP they know fully well that they have been treating the citizens of this country in the harshest of harsh manner. They have been treating the citizens of this country. And so to soften them, you try to bribe them now with this little $19,000 that you're offering them. What a shame. We saw the same day that they were launching this.
Correcto.
Yes, my dear.
I think there are two issues here. Is cash transfer or cash grants a bad thing? You introduced the D word. You seem to be agreeing with Nandalal and others that if you give people money, their own money to spend, you will introduce dependency. So are you making a distinction between whether cash grants are a good thing, but the PPP is misusing it? Or are you saying it's a bad thing and the PPP is misusing it? I think the audience wants to clarify that.
All right, let me say to you, cash grants, it's a good thing. But the implementation, the real message behind it is what the PPP is getting carried away with, and that's not what they're doing. What the PPP are doing here is a bribe. It's a bribe they're offering.
Right. So we got that. So has the Guyana Teachers Union taken a position on whether they agree with an education crash grant? What I hear you saying here, look, this is not an education crash grant. This is a cash grant for giving to parents who have children. You have so many children, they give you $19,000 per child, and you can do what you want with it. You seem to be saying that's not an education cash grant. That's a cash grant to children. An education cash grant would be a grant that is targeted towards being spent on educational tools, whether it's uniform, books, etc., etc. So you're making a distinction between a grant based on the number of children you have and education grant. Am I getting you wrong there or right?
I think you're getting me correct. An educational grant, cash grant, is different from the cash grant, from an ordinary cash grant, from a little small piece that we want to give to the parents. So don't term it as school cash grant when you know fully well that is not the intention.
All right. As the GTU come up with proposals for an education cash grant? Or are you all working towards that?
No. Let me say to you,
Yeah.
when we met with the Minister of Education, the installed minister, somewhere around mid-August, when we had our meeting, the GTU then, and at our second meeting, the GTU shared with our counterparts a set of proposals that we can implement. We shared proposals for the children and we share proposals for teachers. But you know what? The fact that Coretta McDonald is sitting there and the ministry implementing suggestions coming from the union, it seems as if it would seem to not the Ministry of Education, but the political head of the Ministry of Education, that they are bowing to positions being put forward by the GTU. That's how they see it, and this is where the difference comes, where they cannot differentiate between a professional relationship, getting professional business done as against political business.
Let me bring you in here and I'm posing the same two questions to you because I am concerned, and I'm looking at some of the comments from the audience, and they're making the point that whether it's $19 or $19,000, people are suffering, and they need that money, and that leaders should not be seen to be standing in the way of people getting transfers from the government. Are you, Kidaki Amsterdam, and your party, and I'm asking this for academic purposes, but are you all against cash grant, or are you all against the way in which the PPP is using the cash grants to gain political mileage?
All right, let me say for clarity's sake. In my opening comments, I said when we were talking about the money being used to buy tools for the children, I asked the question, who better than the parents to acquire these tools? In other words, I'm saying the money should go into the hands of the parents. I have no problem with the money going into the hands of the parents. And let me make this pellucid. I believe every single dime Guyanese can get out of the coffers of this country, whether it's by form of a bribe or legitimate payouts to them from this illegitimate government, they ought to take. Because it is the nation's money. And people must take every single dime that they can get from them. So, I as an individual, I'm not against cash grant. I'm not against the $19,000 in that it is money in the hands of the people. I am positive the Working People's Alliance is not against $19,000 as it is in the hands of the people. But the Working People's Alliance, you mentioned earlier, what we originally referred to as the Buxton proposal. Professor Clive Thomas, doing his projections on the oil industry and its capacity and the productivity which will result from it, suggested that a grant of $5,000 be given to every Guyanese. And that was at a certain barrels per day production. We have seen those barrels per day multiply, quite frankly. Right? And so the possibility is Guyanese can get way more than $5,000 per household. And so if for academic purposes we were to round this $90, this $19,000 to $100, what citizens are receiving in a directed cash transfer way or targeted cash transfer manner, because it's targeted to students or households with students, is 1/50th. Is 1/50th of what the WPA proposed and what Professor Clive Thomas and I'm sure lots of other economists are certain citizens can get. And so the WPA is not against cash transfer. As a matter of fact, the WPA believes that every household as against households with students alone should get. And it should be 50 times more than is being given right now. So let's clarify that. And I personally endorse that position. I said $19,000 is woefully inadequate. Even if you were to look at it from the point of view of targeted cash transfer to students.
I must say that cash transfers have become very popular, especially since the COVID-19 development. In the United States of America, several cities have introduced cash grants, and what the research is showing is that people spend those grants on food, child care, medicine, and only 1% is spent on tobacco and alcohol. In America, places that like drugs and liquor, right? When you give people the money in their hand, they spend it on food, and it seems to me, if you spend it on food, that food will go to the children. So in a sense, it's part of the education. If they spend it on child care, it also has to do with children. Medicine, children need to be healthy and so forth. So while a parent, corrector, may not spend the money on a tablet or so, but if they spend it on food and they benefit in the children, corrector? You're muted. You're muted. We can't hear you. We can't hear you.
What you're saying there is absolutely correct, and I agree with you. But again, let me say this: schools cash grant is different from a cash grant.
Okay.
That's our thing. Schools cash grant is different from an ordinary cash grant. Right. An ordinary cash grant, whatever, medicine, whatever you want to do. Schools cash grant, school purposes.
Right. So
we're not against that.
Right. But asking you again, has the GTU, since it's arguing for an education cash grant, has the GTU come up with proposals for such grant? Or
we have not looked
in the process of considering such proposals?
Go that again, you were distorted somewhat.
Yeah, asking if the GTU has come up with proposals for an education cash grant.
All right, are you talking here GTU as GTU doing this for its members, or GTU proposing this to the Ministry of Education?
Yes, I'm talking about the latter.
Okay, like I said to you earlier, when we met with the ministry on the first two occasions, we did come up with proposals, and we spoke about gadgets for teachers, gadgets for students. We spoke about the Ministry of Education and the GTU meeting with the telephone giants to talk about offering special packages to parents, to teachers. We spoke about how we can get, with this COVID, how can we get our children to be safe? We spoke about meeting with the Minibus Association to pull together, to put transportation in place so that our students are going to be transported apart from everyone else with the regular minibuses and the reckless drivers, that we were going to deal with a group of buses, whether we were going to do it according to regions fully, or we were going to start it on a pilot and then we take it from there. Those are some of the positions that the GTU came up with.
And what was the response of the ministry to those proposals?
I did say this earlier. The ministry's position, or the political head's position at this time, is that as long as you're having these proposals coming from the GTU, more so if they're coming from Coretta McDonald, they're not going to be looked at, because doing that means that the AP and UAFC is winning. That's how they see it. They can't differentiate Coretta McDonald when she sits at a meeting, a professional committee meeting with the Ministry of Education to deal with educational issues as against Coretta McDonald sitting in Parliament dealing with political issues.
And that's the voice
And that's
of
sad.
Coretta McDonald, General Secretary of the Guyana Teachers Union, locked in battle with the government over this $19,000.
No. We don't have an issue with $19,000. We don't have an issue with $19,000.
Right. There have been a sparring between the two sides on this issue, and we're trying to set the record straight here tonight. And this program, of course, is friendly to cash grants. And so therefore, if I press my yes on it, is that it's an issue that we feel that is important going forward to people benefiting from the monies that come from cash grants. We're going to do our own PSA here, talking about paying our own bills to this program. And when we come back, we'll continue the discussion with McDonald and Kidaki Amsterdam. At 19,000 education cash grant, which we are now learning in the program is not an education cash grant.
Please help keep Politics 101 on social media and broadcast television. If you are in North America, please donate via Cash App or PayPal.
If you are in Guyana and the Caribbean and don't have access to Cash App and PayPal, email your pledge to dhines6106@aol.com and we will direct you how to get your donation to us. Thank you in advance for your donation.
And thanks to those of you who have contributed to Politics 101. And there are some people who I have to thank, and there are some people who have made their contributions but want to do so anonymously. I would like to thank Jackie for her contribution. Thank you very much, Jackie. And for the anonymous people who made their contribution, thank you very much for making your contribution. You're keeping the program alive on this platform, but even more importantly, you're making it possible for people at home who don't have access to Facebook to view Politics 101 on broadcast TV in Guyana, in particular Channel 9, where the program is seen on Thursday nights, on Saturday midday and Sunday midday. It's been broadcasted 3 times per week. Again, thank you all so much for your donation. I know I'm missing a couple of people, but I will get those names and thank you officially. So Anonymous, thank you. I know Jackie, I remember our donation. Thank you very much, Jackie, out of Toronto, making our donation. All right, let's get back to the matter at hand. Kidaki, education cash grant, what goes into that? You have to unmute yourself.
Yes, if you're talking about an education cash grant, obviously we have to look at the educational needs of the individual who it is intended to benefit. A grant is intended to, quote unquote, level the playing field, right? And so if we're talking about educational cash grant, we first and foremost have to determine at every level, from nursery right up, what are the needs of the students? What are the needs of the learners at the varying levels? And what would it take to satisfy the needs of these learners at these different levels? And only then will you be able to, in my mind, put together an adequate package that you can refer to as an educational cash grant that can meet the needs. Even if you say, okay, when we look at this package, it's not feasible for us to fund 100% of it, then at least you would have been able to say to parents or guardians or teachers that, look, we are aware that these are the needs of the students, but at this time, this is what we can meet. And so the possibility then presents itself for you to say, we are going to take this on as a multifaceted project, or as a project that we will have to do over a longer period. A multi-year project, a multi-term project, as it is right now, this 19,000 we are talking about. There's so many uncertainties. Teachers, administrators can't tell parents, for example, if it is a one-time grant, as in for the term, or if it is a one-year grant for the 3 terms. This school year is 39 weeks, as far as I understand.
Let me ask you, Kinati, do you think that such a grant should be each term? I want to hear proposals from you guys.
Yes.
I understand the PPP and what's done. What I want us to do on this program is to move on the criticism. Are you saying that, look, if you're going to give people $19,000, it should be each term, it should be each month, it should be what? That will work.
If you're giving $19,000, based on my calculation, it should be each month. If it is $19,000, it should be each month.
It should be each month. All right. Professor McDonald, if you're talking about an education cash grant and you're saying the $19,000 is inadequate, how often would you like to see, certainly in the short term, over the next year, 2 years, how would you like to see it?
Are you hearing me? Good. Now, this same education, we're talking education cash grant.
Right.
We first, when we heard about this cash grant, we thought it was an educational cash grant, but it doesn't seem to be an educational cash grant, as we're seeing what is happening here. And the first things that the first thoughts that came to our minds were, one, is this grant going to be a termly one? Is it going to be a yearly grant? Is it going to be a one-off? What is this going to be? From the GTU standpoint, when we look at what happens on a daily basis with an ordinary child, $19,000 would not be adequate for a term. $19,000 should be given to each child per month, so as to satisfy the needs of that child, to take him or her through the month, whether we're attending school physically or we are going to be home doing schools virtually. Because let me say to you and to our viewers, while children are at home, you ask any parent out there, while our children are at home, we have to do even more. We have to find even more for them to eat while they're at home. And so $19,000 is not adequate. It would not be adequate for a term, but we would prefer to have that $19,000 per child per month.
So at least the two of you have agreed that $19,000 per month at a minimum would be adequate for the cash grant. Now, there are certain things, because I think the issue here is this. If you want to buy tablets, I think the ministry should do that themselves. Because if you put money in people's hands, as I said, the research is showing they're going to spend it on food. They're going to spend it on transportation for the kids. They're going to spend it on uniform. Something like tablet will be low down. So would it make sense that certain things like tablets and so on, the ministry takes care of those things as the ministry, and the cash grant covers things like food and transportation and uniform, things that parents are more likely to spend money on in any case. Kilaki?
It would make it would make sense. Are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Yes, I'm saying it would make a lot of sense.
Operator, please keep the camera on the speakers.
Yes, it would make a lot of sense in my mind if the ministry were to focus on the acquisition of the hardware. Let me call it that for the students.
Yeah.
And in addition to the acquisition for the hardware, they provide a financial support to the parents to ensure that the learners can make full use of the hardware. I grew up knowing, and I continue to believe, that there's no point in telling an individual about education, going to school, attending school, doing schoolwork, if that individual is hungry. And so, in the same vein, providing the hardware alone does not necessarily mean that the child is going to be able to use it and benefit from it. So yes, it would make much sense if the ministry provides the hardware, and we are talking about tablet, but a tablet or whatever the device is has to go along with the availability of bandwidth for that child to benefit from its use. And so when I'm talking about hardware, I'm talking about all of those components which are necessary for the child to benefit from an online education as it is that we are in this era of online education, right?
How about that proposal where the ministry of hardware that is referring to it as, and the grant goes to the parents ostensibly to deal with things like food and transportation and uniform and so on. What do you think about that?
I would be happy to see the other aspect of it being completed or being started. I'd be happy to see that. And so here is it, we have going hand in hand. Parents are responsible for one aspect of their child's education, and the ministry playing its part to make those two hands clap. We'll be happy to see that happen.
Wonderful, wonderful. I think we're getting some consensus here tonight, and as we talk through, we're getting some clarity on how this thing can work. Actually, Coretta raised the very important question of teachers being told to handle money. Now, I don't know industrial law very well, not at all. From your understanding, asking teachers to distribute this, is that a violation of industrial relations? I'm asking you before I come back to the trade unionists.
Yes, it is a violation. Every employee, every worker, every job has a job description. And nowhere in the teacher's job description am I aware that it says that teachers are responsible for paying out government's money to anybody, right? Even in the instances of salaries, I don't know that the HM is responsible for paying out salaries to teachers. So yes, it has to be against their job description. And to insist that they do it, to insist that they make themselves available to do it, falls right in the pattern of bullyism, an advantage taking that our teachers have been experiencing over the years. And so I personally, I stand with the union if they say to their members, do not undertake paying out of any money. You can be there to identify your learners or identify the parents of your learners so that the process is one that is less likely to be fraudulent. But outside of that, I stand with the union. Don't handle the government's money. It's not your responsibility.
Is it a violation of trade union rules, industrial rules? We're not hearing you.
It's a violation of this circular that the ministry themselves have sent out to teachers. And this wasn't a circular that went out yesterday or day before yesterday. This was a circular that has been out there many, many moons ago by the PPP. So again, when it's convenient for them, it's all well and good. But when it's not convenient, they scream, they shout, they throw tantrums. Yes.
Is the union going to press this matter? Or you just send a circle and you leave? Is the union going to press teachers not to handle money? Are you going to make that an issue? Or you just send out the circle and leave it to the teachers?
No, we have advised our teachers in terms of the circular. We have had meetings, branch meetings with our teachers, and we're advising them not to handle monies. You'll be there, again, like I said earlier, to be a part of the process, identifying your parents, be there to set up whether you're going to have 3 stations or 2 stations, depending on the population of your school, or 5 stations. You're going to have all the necessary resources or the necessary tools that you're going to need to have the exercise run smoothly. But in terms of handling monies, no. And we have been pressing this at our teachers. But you know what? This government, they like to dictate. They like to victimize. And we've had numerous instances of these. And so in some regions, the teachers feel pressured, and so they suck into the pressure, because the education officers have been threatening them, and these are the local education officer and senior education officers have been sending loads and loads of threats to teachers, and so some teachers buckle under the pressure. But I know there are instances where other teachers have decided, I am not handling monies because my union would have reminded me that I should not be dealing with monies, and so I'm not going to be handling monies. I'm going to be there to be part of the process. As a matter of fact, we have an agreement with the Ministry of Education that says the first 2 weeks after school closes, a teacher could be called upon to, 1, complete work that was not completed during the term, be part of any workshop exercises that is being planned by the Ministry of Education. And that's the first 2 weeks during the August vacation. Teachers, the last week during the vacation, teachers are supposed to be there to prepare, and we call that preterm activities, where you prepare for the term. And so those teachers know those fully well. But in terms of monies, handling monies, that's a no-no. But the Ministry of Education, through its minister, they are dictators.
You mentioned teachers in the outlying area coming under severe pressure. What about teachers closer to Georgetown? What has been the response? Has it been positive?
Somewhat distorted. Sorry.
What has been the response of the teachers closer to Georgetown Region 4, Region 5, Region 3, etc.?
Well, we are now in Region 5. In the most of the outskirts, they are in Region 5. But I know in Region 5, and some teachers in Region 2. Some teachers in Region 9, they have said clearly to their head teachers, as a matter of fact, they indicated beforehand that they were not going to be around, and so they were absent. Those who are around, they would have indicated, we are going to be at school, we are going to be part of we are going to be active in other parts of the process, but in terms of monies, we are not putting our hands there. And those teachers have been complaining. They've been sending messages to us. They've been calling us to say, well, this is what has been said to them, and the other have been said to them. And all we are saying to those teachers, and in some instances, we have called up the regional education officers to say, well, you know, we got this report from our teachers. What really is the issue here? If the teacher is saying that they are prepared to be part of the process in this area, this area and that area? Why are you forcing them to be in other areas? And some Redos have said to us, from DEOs, district education officers have said to us, Miss, we understand these are instructions that were given to us, but based on what the teacher is requesting, or based we understand the teacher's request, and we will abide by that. And so many times when we have all these political directions coming down, the persons at the lower level, they understand what is happening, and they work to suit. As a matter of fact, teachers have called, parents have called to complain. Miss, sir, why do I have to be a part of this? If the PPP want to campaign, let them go and campaign. Why do we have to come here to share cash grants? And then you have a whole lot of people lined up in an sitting in an auditorium to listen to a 25 minutes or a half an hour political speech where all you do is cut down and cut down and cut down and cut down on what this government did and what the other government did, what the coalition did, let me say that. And Miss, it's disgusting. Many of our teachers have indicated that they've walked out of the auditoriums, and when they were ready to issue the grants, they returned to the auditoriums to start to help with the process. And so this whole thing, like I said, is not about an educational grant. It's about a political gimmick.
Coming down, time corrector. Where are things at the moment in relation to face-to-face reopening of schools?
Where are
things at the moment as it relates to the reopening of schools for face-to-face instruction?
Well, at the moment, we are hearing lots of talks. Schools are going to be reopened in September. Schools are going to be reopened in September. But the GTU would have already pointed out a series of activities that are supposed to happen before we even think about reopening of schools. So as it is, we're only hearing about this reopening of schools, but in terms of meeting with the teachers' representatives and listening to their proposals and or wanting to act on their proposals, that has not yet materialized.
What are some of the proposals for your prerequisites for reopening of face-to-face instruction?
First of all, we have to decide to meet, and we have to decide to meet there on mutual grounds and exercise cordial respect for each other. That's the first thing. Secondly, we're going to have to decide whether schools are going to be reopened fully, or we are going to still use the blended approach, and that is some days on and some days off, or we have a particular group particular groups that are going to be on, particular grades, as a matter of fact, who are going to be in school physically, and we'll use the others virtually. We have to agree on that. Once we would have agreed on that, then the next step is to identify the grades. Once we would have agreed and we identified the grades, we need to look at the schools. How many, I'm just going to use randomly here grades. If we're going to talk about grades 9, 10, and 11, which is 3rd, 4th, and 5th form for the older folks who were accustomed to that, or if we're going to talk about grades 10 and 11, then we have to now look at the amount of classes we have. How many grades 11? How many grades 10? How many grades 9? And then when we look at those numbers, it would guide us with regards to how many classrooms would be needed. When we do our 6 feet apart spacing, it would tell us how many classrooms we need. That too will guide us with regards to how often we have to sanitize these rooms, whether we are going to need additional cleaners, and how much on an average, how much cleaning detergents we are going to need per day, which would give us a week, a month, and then a term. Once we can agree on those, then that's going to be a work in progress, and we can think then about reopening of schools, because you and I know COVID is going to be here for a long time. And there is no way that we are going to be able to reopen schools fully if we don't put the systems in place. In addition to those, we have to now look at having a section for a sick bay. We have to talk about additional masks, additional hand sanitizers, various positions that we are going to set up those sanitizing booths, so that students coming into school, they stop at the gate, have their temperature checked, their hands are washed at the trough there, and when they have to walk around the school, what systems you put in place for them to sanitize their hands, changing of mask after what, maybe 3 hours, 2 hours, whatever it is. And we're going to have to talk about the length of time that we're going to want to have these students in school, students slash pupils, because if we're taking grades 10, 11, and maybe fourth standard, third standard and fourth standard, according to the older folks then, but those are grades 5 and 6 now. How long are we going to have them wearing masks? We must have additional masks to give to them. So those are the basic requirements that we first have to look at before we even talk about the reopening of school.
Any discussion on mandatory testing for teachers? How would you respond if the government were to put that in place?
Well, the thing is, we have recognized that in what is happening right now, we have had teachers not going out there. Many teachers are not going out there to have their testing done. The ministry, they were trying to implement that, but we, because they recognized that teachers weren't up to it, teachers weren't responding to that, they relaxed on that. What we have found is that teachers have been doing testing, having themselves subjected to testing. When you find maybe one person, one student or a pupil or a member of staff testing positive for COVID, then the entire school, and of course the GTU had to be pushing to ensure that the schools are closed, they are sanitized, and the 14 days period is observed. Some teachers opt to do testing then. Other than that, teachers have not gone out there to have themselves subjected to COVID-19 test.
And the vaccine, they have not.
And well, it's the same thing with the vaccines. The GTU would have said to our members, it is your right to decide whether you want to have the vaccine now, next week, next year. That is your right. If you want to have the vaccine or you don't want to have the vaccine, that is your right. It's for you to decide. We are not going to dictate that all teachers must have the vaccines. What we have been saying to our teachers is that COVID is real. COVID kills. And we need to ensure that we are safe at all times, that you practice all the safety measures at all times. So that in itself includes being vaccinated or not being vaccinated, but ensuring that you wash your hands thoroughly, you wear your mask correctly and wear it every time you have to be out there, and you sanitize as often as possible, as well as staying away from large crowds.
Do you think that we're ready to face instruction?
No, I personally don't think we're ready for face-to-face instruction. If you look at the numbers, the COVID-19 numbers, in this period when children are not back in school, when teachers are not back in school, when there isn't a whole lot of face-to-face instruction. Remember, face-to-face instruction will necessitate people traveling more by way of public transportation. It will necessitate people being in contact with each other more by the provision of services and so on, goods and services. And if a lot of that is on the downward trend right now, and the numbers are continuing to escalate in this country, people are continuing to be infected and die. I do not see how it is we can start to think that we are ready for our children to go back into the classroom, for teachers to go back into the classroom for face-to-face instruction. I simply think it is madness. I just think people's egos are getting ahead of them, and they're not rational beings. Because anyone who is rational will look at what is happening currently and understand that until we can arrest the continued escalation of illnesses coming from this disease, then it would make absolutely no sense asking people to go back in the classroom for face-to-face instruction. So no, that's the short answer. I don't think we're ready.
Coretta, we are coming down to program time. Give you the opportunity for closing comments, thoughts.
Dr. Hines, first of all, I want to thank you for inviting me once again to this forum. I want to thank your viewers for allowing us to be in their homes. And I just want to say to all of us, education is a serious business. And if we are serious about the education of this nation or educating our children, then we ought to leave the politics out and be professionals in our dealings. I just want to remind all that COVID is real, COVID kills, and that we ought to ensure that at all times we remain safe, and that includes wearing your mask and wearing them correctly, washing your hands very, very often, sanitizing, and staying away from large crowds. To our parents, I want to say to you, the GTU, nor Coretta MacDonald, we're not against you receiving monies from this regime. Our issue is if we are going to, that we expect the government to do even more for our children, to ensure that when you talk about because you care, it's not only a drama for a minute or two or for a week, but it's coming genuinely, which would benefit all and sundry, regardless of your race, your color, your creed, your political affiliation, all will benefit. And these resources are going to be used for all of us, because Guyana belongs to all of us. I also want to say to you that we value your contributions. We want to see your children succeed. And as long as the conditions are right, the Guyana Teachers Union will support any positive proposal coming from the Ministry of Education. We are going to support them as long as it will ensure that our teachers and our learners are safe. We are going to endorse those proposals. To our teachers, I want to say to you, thank you for what you have done, your contributions during this past academic year. You did it with your students. As in spite of all the challenges that we faced during this term, we ensure that we stuck to the task of completing our work schedules in terms of preparing our children, those who are writing CSEC at this time, and those who would have already completed 2 mock exams for the National Grade 6. We will continue to work with you. We will continue to work with your children. And as the nation's molders, we will continue to stand tall. Teachers, as a representative of the GTU, I will continue to champion the cause for you. I will continue to speak for those of you who can't speak for yourself. And we will ensure that the injustices that are seeming to be creeping up against teachers and benefits that teachers are deserving of, we are going to ensure that you receive them. To all of Guyana, let's continue to live as Guyanese citizens. Let's continue to applaud positive initiatives, and let's work towards the Let's work towards healing this deep race hate and all of these wounds that have been created. Let's work towards healing them so we can shout with one voice, one people, one nation, with one destiny.
General Secretary of the Teachers Union and President of the Trade Union Congress. Jackie Amsterdam, your closing thoughts?
Well, my closing thoughts are simple. Guyana is an oil-producing country. The Sovereign Wealth Fund has lots of money inside. Instead of borrowing on that money to do all kinds of what I would want to call cosmetic projects, this installed administration ought to utilize it in meaningful ways for the long-term benefits of the citizens of this country. And in this instance, what we need in this country to benefit our learners is an online education platform that is par excellence. We want a platform that can meet the needs of our learners. And that platform must take into consideration the hardware and software needed by the children, the access to data. For example, I know that in the past, children used to get access, although in a limited way because it was being unrolled at the time, access to community hubs. I understand a lot of those hubs have now been turned off. Utilize the nation's financial resources to provide such services so that our learners can benefit from it. What we want to see is not window dressing. We want to see long-term, impactful projects resulting from the income which this country is getting from the oil industry in particular, and natural resources as a whole. I think for too long we have engaged in cheap political games, political gimmicks, as I think Coretta called it. And that has not benefited our people. It has not lifted the living standards of our people. It certainly has not lifted our educational standards. And we are in an era where we have access to resources which we never had before. And it is my humble hope, as a matter of fact, my clarion call, that those resources be used to benefit this nation and benefit it in a wholesome way. And what better way than to invest in the education of our now generation? Because in the short term and in the long term, they are the ones who would be expected to carry the mantle of this nation. So that's my closing remark. Let the resources from the oil industry be used for the benefit of the people of this country. More so, let it be used to invest in developing platforms which will ensure that the next generation is adequately educated to carry this nation forward.
Thank you very much, Jackie Amsterdam. Thank you very much, Coretta McDonald. I think we have added some clarity to this question of the linkage between cash grants, as they call them, we call them cash transfer, and education. I think we were able to clarify some misunderstandings. We were able to bring some new light. We were able to have the trade unionists, the teachers union rep, general secretary, report to us on what the union has been doing. We know we live in an era when the union is not as strong as it used to be. Yet, in a society like Guyana, the union remains relevant. Thank you very much, Coretta. Thank you very much, Kidaki. I'll have you guys back on because I'm sure this issue is not going to go away. Thanks again. Thank you very much.
You're welcome, and thank you, viewers, for allowing me into your space.
Thanks. And of course, we're dealing with the very important issue of education. We're dealing with the important issue of what to do about oil resources, whether the government spends it for us or we spend it for ourselves. These are issues that will remain on the front burner and must remain on the front burner. It's good to have heard tonight from educators. It's good to have heard from a representative of the union. We can only hope that as we continue to navigate these difficult times, that some of the proposals made here tonight will find their way into policy, because at the end of the day, it is policy that matters. Until the next time, David Hines thanking you for staying with us. I want to thank somebody who made their contribution. I want to thank Dennis. Dennis, thanks for your contribution to Politics 101. And to those of you, like I said, who have made your contribution, thank you so much. Those of you who have not yet gotten there, we say thanks in anticipation. Good night.
Please help keep Politics 101 on social media and broadcast television. If you are in North America, please donate via Cash App or PayPal.
If you are in Guyana and the Caribbean and don't have access to Cash App and PayPal, email your pledge to dhines6106@aol.com and we will direct you how to get your donation to us. Thank you in advance for your donation.